this week's episode of We the People, the only show that takes a look at local, state, and national politics as it pertains to the East Alabama area. My name is Corey Bradford, and I want to thank you all for joining us this week. This past week, we had the privilege and honor of having one of our first major interviews for We the People. And it was an interview with Ron Crumpton, the Democrat candidate for the U.S. Senate here in Alabama. He is running against long-time Senator Richard Shelby, who has been in the Senate since the 1980s. And Ron Crumpton plans to give him a run for his money. We talked with Crumpton about a lot of different issues, ranging from the economy to education to the presidential election. And he had a lot to say, so we have a lot to show you from him today, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for most of this episode. So, with no further interruptions, here is the part one of the Ron Crumpton interview.
Since this is your first time visiting the show, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, the question I always hate, but I hate talking about myself. My name's Ron Crumpton. I've been an activist in Alabama for the last 8 years, fighting on a variety of issues ranging from medical marijuana to women's rights to raising the minimum wage, a whole host of issues. It's something that I came into a little bit later in life. Originally, I was a landscaper and a bowling alley mechanic.
Really?
And I hurt my back, and I got to where I couldn't do that anymore. And I went back to college and I studied political science, particularly American government and political theory. And I got involved in activism from that point. I actually wrote an article for the school paper that kind of got me. It's called Legalization for Medication, and it was about medical marijuana. And it kind of got me sucked in to the game of, an organization that was trying to pass a law contacted me. And 2 months later, I was running their legislative campaign, which was something that I had never done before.
Wow.
And that has kind of, in a roundabout way, led me, here to where I am today. So, let's see. I guess it'd be 15 years ago, somebody told me that I would be the nominee for the United States Senate. I would have thought they were nuts, but it's been a wild ride. So.
Well, speaking of United States Senate, why have you decided to run for the state of Alabama?
Well, there's several things really. One of the big things is 2 years ago or so, when candidate qualifying closed, nobody was running against Jeff Sessions, and I basically decided then, because I was tired of seeing Republicans walk into federal office unopposed. I was tired of seeing Democrats run to the right in the general election and get killed. And I was, just tired of seeing Democrats who wouldn't stand up and be Democrats. And I've always kind of had, what I call a warrior's heart. And if there's not somebody fighting for the issues that are important to me, it's just natural to me to do it myself. So, that's kind of what brought me here. And it's something that somebody needs to do, because we've got to have change, in our Washington delegation, because they are hurting the people of Alabama. It's just that plain and simple.
Now, changing pace a little bit, we've read a little bit about your 9-point plan for the economy. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what it entails?
Well, the biggest thing about plan for the economy is the changes that it would make in education. That is the most important thing that we can do as a nation. There was a time in this country when we were the most intelligent people in the world. We were the first country to require our kids to go to school, and we did it during a time that most countries wouldn't let the average kid go to school.
Right.
So, and that made us the innovators. And during that time, if you bought, no matter where you were in the world, if you bought a car, you bought an American car. If you bought a radio, you bought an American radio. TV, you bought an American TV. And over time, that's changed. And if you look at Americans' share of the global economy, and you look at where it was and where it is, and then you look at a graph on education funding, where it was and where it is, and the two correlate. And so, the biggest thing about my plan is investment in education. My plan would invest $90 billion a year in education. $65 million of that would go to repair, replace, and expand our dilapidated schools. The other 25 would go to provide the school systems with technology. You know, a lot of the schools don't have effective Wi-Fi. They've got computers that are more than 10 years old. And, you know, we can't really expect our teachers to teach our kids the technologies of the future using the technologies of the past. That just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is something that we need to do. And as far as, you know, the buildings that we're using, the biggest majority of the schools that our children go to school in were made or built to educate the baby boomers. You know, they're old, a lot of them are falling apart, and they just don't meet the needs. There's a lot of them that have been maintained well and are still completely usable, but even those schools have problems like they don't have, you know, sufficient wiring, you know, for the computer systems and everything else they need because they were, you know, built in a different era that, you know, didn't require that kind of power. But, you know, $65 billion a year over 10 years, $650 billion would be enough to basically build 32,500 or 32,250 brand new schools, which that is the equivalent of 1/3 of all public schools in this country.
Wow.
Now, we're not going to, you know, tear down and rebuild. Some of that will be, you know, it's actually going to affect about 2/3 of the schools because, you know, a lot of them will be getting improvements. Only probably 10 to 15% of the schools will actually be replaced. And then you've got probably another 5% of brand new schools. And then you know, a lot of the schools it'll just be repairs, updating them, that kind of thing. But, you know, just making sure that our kids get a primary education is not enough. There's studies out right now that show that 2/3 of all jobs will require a college education or some form of advanced training by 2020, and less than 40% of Americans over 25 are qualified to fill those jobs. So if we don't do something, you know, those jobs are going to ship off overseas.
Something has to change.
So we need to make an investment in higher education too. And my plan for higher education would actually change the Pell Grant system. It would raise the Pell Grant from around, I think right now they just raised it, I think it's about $5,800. It would raise the Pell Grant to $10,300, which is the average cost of tuition, fees, and books at the average American public university. Doing that and changing the way that the EFC or the expected family contribution is figured so that students get more of the money and more kids qualify will allow a lot more children the opportunity to go to college, and it will make it to where we can fill those jobs. Because this, you know, this is not something, you know, people seem to look at this and like it'll take forever. And that's just not the case. You know, that first class that starts high school, you know, with the new buildings and the new technologies, you know, will make a difference in 4 years. You know,
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to take 30 years down the road. I mean, now granted, the kids are going to even be better that started,
Yeah.
at first grade, you know, with everything that they needed. But you know, it's something that's going to have immediate results. And like I said, you know, innovation is the key to everything. It's the key to a strong economy, because innovation, I mean, it is what made our country great. I mean, it's that simple. We were the innovators. And getting that back, we need to invest in things like green technologies, because that is the future of power. And whatever country it is that, you know, leads on that is going to lead in the global economy.
As a startup, an existing small business, or a business looking to scale up, you'll run across this problem. What does my company need out of a website? My name is Joshua Shoemaker. I'm a web developer that specializes in creating fast, modern, and responsive websites that can suit all of your needs, and to fit all screen sizes to reach everyone in your audience. If you are or have considered investing into an internal or consumer-facing website or application, Then contact me today at joshuashoemaker@takethistodos.com and use the subject line We the People promo for extended free consulting.
There's more to the plan than that. We need to completely change the way that we pay people in this country, and by that I mean we need to raise the minimum wage, and we need to address equal pay in this country. And when I say equal pay, I'm not just talking about women. I'm talking about women and minorities. Right now, women make 78 cents on the dollar compared to a white male. A white female makes 78 cents on the dollar compared to a white male. A black male makes about 74 cents on the dollar. A Hispanic male about 68 cents on the dollar. A black female about 66 cents on the dollar. And by the time you get down to Hispanic female, you're looking at 54 cents on the dollar. And that's just ridiculous because, I mean, and it affects so many families across the country. If you've got mom working at a job that pays man $500 a week, she's making $390. That's a difference of $440 a month. That's rent for a lot of people. That's car payment and insurance for a lot of people. You know, that's more than a month's food, you know, groceries for a lot of people, you know, so.
And if that's mom, then she's got young ones to take
Yeah,
care of.
exactly. I mean, it affects the whole family. And if you look at it, we're never going to eliminate pay discrimination. As long as you have somebody who wants to discriminate against somebody, they're going to find a way to get it. But we can realistically get all those numbers up to 90%. And doing that would mean an injection of about $600 billion in new wages into the economy. And to give you a little concept of how much $600 billion is, that is about equal to our defense budget, or enough money to buy every NFL football team 13 times. So it's something that we need to address. You know, that's a lot of money. I mean, that much money in the economy is going to create jobs. You know, building the school, $65 billion in construction contracts. That's going to create jobs.
Yeah.
And that's before you even get to the fact that we need to, another investment that we need to make is one that we're going to have to make at some point or another, and that's in infrastructure. Right now our roads are costing us about $121 billion a year in car damage and time and everything else. It would cost about $91 billion a year to fix them. You know, so it kind of makes more sense to fix them because it's only going to get worse as time goes on. And when you start talking about bridges and stuff, that gets completely scary because there's over 200 million trips per day across Americans' bridges, and at least a third of them are found to be unsound. So that's something that we need to address, and it's going to create jobs. So it's something that is good that we address. You know, that's one of the things that enabled us to get out of the Depression, and we're still fighting the Great Recession. There's still problems there. But one of the things that enabled us to get out of the Great Depression was the works bills. You know, the TVA, the things that the Roosevelt administration did to put people back to work. It's things that our country needed to do as a whole for the people, and at that time it made sense to pay people to do it because it sparked the economy. And those are the kind of things that government needs to do. I have a way to pay for that. You know, my plan, we're going to do it we're going to change the tax structure to where companies like GE and Boeing that make billions of dollars every year but pay absolutely no taxes, pay taxes, because the secret, I'll tell you a little secret, it's not a big secret, but if they pay their taxes, they're still going to make billions of dollars every year.
Yes, they will.
So we need them to pay their taxes, and we need to use that to pay for these programs and move tax breaks, the majority of tax breaks, away from these big corporations that are making billions of dollars and move them to small business to help small business get started, because they're the ones that needs the tax breaks. Republicans like to talk about handouts. I'm sorry. giving Boeing and GE all these tax breaks, that's handouts. Trickle-down economics and historically low minimum wage has brought us to a point to where corporate profits are the highest that they've been in the last 88 years, and the average worker's pay is the lowest that it's been in the last 66 years. So, things need to change, and that's what, I'm about.
Alabama is well known for its beautiful nature and wonderful outdoor scenery. That's why it's up to all of us to help preserve the environment and nature that exists here in Alabama. Try not to litter. Pick up after yourself when you can. Adopt a mile. Do your part to keep Alabama looking like the beautiful state that it is. A message from We the People.
Well, speaking of Richard Shelby, he has been a U.S. Senator in Alabama for quite some time. How do you think that you differ from him, and why do you think that you're a better choice for the job?
How do I differ from him?
How
How do I differ from him other than in every possible conceivable way? We're absolutely nothing alike. Richard Shelby has been in Washington for 30 years, and he hasn't really had a real challenge in the elections since he won his first term in the Senate against Jeremiah Denton in 1986. So he has a lot of things to answer for if he's actually forced to answer them. But Richard Shelby, he has been there 30 years, but he sponsors the least number of bills of any senator in the United States Senate. I mean, you can look that up on the internet, and he's listed as 97th, but there's a three-way tie for 97th. They all have 6 bills apiece. And none of the bills are aimed at, the issues that are important to Alabama. He's got a bill that would start a flat tax, which would destroy seniors because it would make them pay tax on their entire Social Security benefit. Right now, seniors on Social Security get an exemption for about the first $12,000 worth of income that they don't have to pay taxes on. That would change under his law. Some seniors who make a little bit more money, have some retirement things coming in, would actually have to pay taxes on the value of their Medicare. The bill's supposed to help the people of Alabama, but I just don't see it happening or helping anybody other than the top 10% of wage earner or income earners in this country. He sponsors a bill that he says is about helping the small banks, but every organization that's looked at it says that 90% of the things in the bill would only apply to the largest 5 or 6 banks in the country. And basically, he calls it his Regulatory Relief Act, that the banks are over-regulated. And basically, it would destroy all the provisions put in under what was called Dodd-Frank to protect our economy after the Great Recession. When you look at the money, he's got one of the biggest war chests in Washington, but when you look at the money, 0.3%, I think it is, comes from small money donors. The vast majority of it comes from the defense industry and the big banks. And if you look at his bills, he's trying to do away with the regulations against the big banks. He jumps on every military spending bill that comes down the pipe. It's quite clear who he's working for, and it's not the people of Alabama.
Considering now that we're on the subject, what changes do you think need to be made in America's Congress currently?
Well, the biggest change.
It's a broad question, I know.
The biggest change that needs to be made by the voters, and that is that they need to quit electing regardless of which party they're in, they need to quit electing all of these obstructionists. The people they're not interested in doing what's best for you. They're interested in winning and making sure that the other side doesn't win. And that's not in anybody's best interest. You know, when our government's worked at its best, it's because you had people who could reach across the aisle and make deals. And you can't take it personally. You've got to be able to stand up there and yell at a guy about one issue, walk next door into the next room, put your arm around him, and praise him on another issue. You know, I mean, you can't take it personally. You gotta stand with whoever when you agree, and then fight them when you disagree.
You got to have thick skin.
Yeah, and you've got to be able to do it without letting one affect the other. And that's the biggest problem I think that we have in Washington, is that we're putting the wrong people in there.
Speaking of the wrong and the right people, what are your views on the current 2016 presidential election? And is there a particular candidate that you're rooting for, who's caught your eye?
Well, I'm still hoping that somehow or another Willie Nelson pulls out the nomination.
Yes.
But you know, that's one thing that I have tried desperately to avoid this go round, simply because on the Democratic side, the two sides have been so visceral about it. You know, I've never seen it quite like it is. But I mean, I'll support whoever the nominee is, and I'll tell you, like I tell everybody else, if as far as you're going to push me to picking a candidate is to say that I'm most like Bernie. As far if you look at what he agrees with, or you know what he's trying to do, what he believes, what his agenda is, we see eye to eye on many things. The biggest majority of the things that we disagree on are not the issues themselves. It's things like how to pay for the issue or something of that nature. So, I would have no problems working with Hillary Clinton either, though. I have met the Clintons before. The only time in my life that I've ever lived outside the state of Alabama, really, I lived in Arkansas, and I had been sent out there by a company. I used to run phone rooms for groups that did fundraising for like the Alabama State Troopers Association and stuff.
Wow.
And the company I worked for got the contract for the Arkansas State Troopers Association. And they include the Capitol Police, the state troopers include the Capitol Police. And the guy in Arkansas who was the president of the association was also the head of the Capitol Police, and his office was like 2 doors down from Bill Clinton's. And I met both Hillary and Bill a couple of times when I had to go in there and talk to the representative from the state police, and that was in like 1990 when he was serving his last term as governor before winning the presidency.
Well, finally, Mr. Crumpton, what are some of your best qualities that would make you a great senator?
Well, I mean, it's, I kind of mentioned earlier that I have a warrior's heart, and I like to fight, and that's something that's important. You can't, that's one of the things that I have, one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of Democrats. If you get away from Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and a few others, then you've got a bunch of people that just won't stand up. You've got so few people that will actually stand up and say, no, that's wrong. And we need more of that. I've always been a fighter, but I don't just fight to be fighting either. I have to have a reason, and it's like I said before, I don't let it bother me on down the road. Unfortunately, some of the people I fight with, it bothers them down the road, but I think that's an important quality for anybody, because the legislature is an adversarial process. So you've got to be a fighter. I think one of the biggest qualities is I actually care about people. I think my heart's in the right place. Shelby's record, the bills he's pushing, the fact that he's wants to turn Social Security into a voucher system, and he's not really doing anything for the people of Alabama. We live in a state where 45% of single parents live in poverty. We've got 380,000 children on food stamps. We're 49th in education, and he doesn't sponsor anything that addresses poverty or, improving education. And, for him to be the senator of Alabama, with us having the situation that we do have, I just think it's appalling that he's not doing something to address those issues. And the fact that he seems to be spending all of his time, just trying to pad his own pocket, because there's nothing else that can be construed out of the bills that he's, working on, that he's trying to do anything else. I mean, if you look at it, it's not like that I'm making a leap to make these assertions.
Yeah.
I mean, they're simple facts, and they can't be denied, None of his legislation that he has filed specifically addresses anything to do with the state of Alabama. So,
and there's so much that you can do for our state.
Yeah, and
there's so much you can stand for.
There is so much that you can do. I mean, every year he talks big about, he gets these, brings in a little bit of money and everything, which that's basically, shiny beads and dressings, it's just something to distract you from the real problems that we face and make it look like he's actually doing something, when the policies that he tries to advance and the policies that he supports does far more harm to the people of Alabama than the little, trinkets that, he brings into the state. And I think that the state of Alabama needs a progressive senator that, is true to Alabama, true to her needs, and true to the needs of her people, and not the Wall Street elite that funds his campaign war chest.
Who has been somewhere where the people of Alabama have been before as well.
Exactly. So.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr.
I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, thank you.
That was an excellent interview. I want to thank everybody who helped, from our producer Tommy to our editor Joshua, who was also there, who helped put together that interview. I want to thank, of course, Ron Crumpton for coming on my show, talking with us, and obviously we invite him to come back anytime he likes. And I want to thank my correspondent Mallory for conducting that interview. Obviously, it goes without saying that we would love to have Richard Shelby come on the show and present his side to things and tell us why we should vote for him for senator here in Alabama this fall. So obviously, Richard Shelby, if you're watching, you have an invitation that extends to you, and if you want to come to the show, get in contact with us and we'll be more than likely to do so. That's all we have time for this week on We the People. My name is Corey Bradford. I want to thank you all for watching the show. Thanks again to Ron Crumpton for being on the show. We'll see you guys next week.